Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Thursday, November 29th. That was my girlfriend, Shelby Lynn, from the album I Am Shelby Lynn. I saw her in concert about 2 years ago in Teaneck, New Jersey, and she's awesome. But what wasn't awesome was the Middle East today. I think today, Thursday, November 29th, is going to go down in history as one of the key dates of this decade. And we may not understand it for a year or two, but historians will go back. This was a horrible day. And you're not going to see too much on it on the nightly news later, but let me tell you. In Iraq, which is getting very little press, the 2-day total in a series of car bombings is over 80. And in Syria, the main road to the airport in Damascus was closed because of heavy fighting. The airport closed. Emirates Airlines and Egypt Air canceled flights to Damascus because of the, quote, deteriorating situation. The clashes came as the internet and phone service has been shut down nationwide. Totally unprecedented move. Both sides blaming each other. The Assad regime blaming terrorists for cutting the service off. But it could easily be the Assad regime cutting the service off as they mount what is purported to be the biggest offensive of the war against rebel-held districts. At least that's what residents in central Damascus are telling the BBC. State TV is saying that they are fighting Al-Qaeda elements. This is exactly what I told you yesterday. In the case of Syria, the New York Times had a ridiculous piece this morning. It said some officials continue to worry that the risk of intervention, both in American lives and in setting off a broader conflict, potentially involving Turkey, are too great to justify action. Others argue that more aggressive steps are justified in Syria by the loss in life there, the risk that its chemical weapons could get loose, and the opportunity to deal a blow to Iran's only ally in the region. The debate now coursing through the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA resembles a similar one among America's main allies. And the Times piece goes on to quote Britain's David Cameron. Look, let's be frank, what we've done over the last 18 months hasn't been enough. It's actually more than 20 now. Cameron said 3 weeks after visiting a Syrian refugee camp in Jordan that the slaughter continues, the bloodshed is appalling, the bad effects it's having on the region, the radicalization, but also the humanitarian crisis that is engulfing Syria, just like I've been talking about. So let's work together on really pushing what more we can do. Well, Cameron's got the right idea, but it's too freaking late. Our inaction unleashed the whirlwind. That much is clear. The world is calling out for U.S. leadership, and it's non-existent. So in Egypt today, as I speak, the Constituent Assembly, the Islamist-led Constituent Assembly, is rushing through a vote on the Constitution, even though President Morsi had granted them, as part of his sweeping powers, 2 months more to work on it. So the Assembly is voting on each of 234 articles in the draft Constitution. And they're doing this because the Constitutional Court, that is at war with Morsi, indicated it would rule on Sunday whether to dissolve the Assembly. And that's the whole standoff between the courts and Morsi. And Morsi had promised to surrender his sweeping powers once a constitution was approved, and then it could be put to a referendum as early as mid-December. But you have to understand the Constituent Assembly has 100 members. The 20 liberals, left-wing and Christian members are boycotting it. So essentially the other 80 are either Muslim Brotherhood or Salafist, those great guys who want to blow up the pyramids. So the constitution process is being hijacked by the Islamists. And another massive rally by the opposition is planned for tomorrow, Friday. Also, as I speak, I believe the UN General Assembly is voting on the Palestinians' proposal to be upgraded to status of non-member state, a non-member state UN observer. That would give Palestine its designation, which is the same that the Vatican has. And essentially, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says he wants to restart negotiations with Israel after its elections in January, which then that abandons the Palestinian Authority's previous position that all construction and settlements in Jerusalem had to be frozen first. Israel had threatened to announce the construction of another 3,000 housing units and settlements if the Palestinian bid went through, but the Netanyahu government has recently toned down its rhetoric. However, along with threatening to abandon the Oslo Accords, Israel has in the past, when the Palestinians have made moves of this kind, this is unprecedented, it's withheld about $96 million in taxes that Israel collects each month on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. It's unclear how the Netanyahu government will react tonight or tomorrow or the days ahead when the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly will approve Palestine being granted non-member state UN observer status. Netanyahu's spokesman Mark Regev said Israel's response will be measured, but Israel is not against Palestinian statehood in the framework of peace and reconciliation, but what they seem to be doing is divorcing statehood from peace and reconciliation. The peace process was based on a signed Palestinian commitment that all outstanding issues would be resolved through negotiation, as Mr. Regev said. And in going to the UN, the Palestinians were breaking that commitment. If the Palestinians want to break both the spirit and letter and the letter of signed agreements, they cannot expect Israel will not respond. I told you the other day that the UK, and I don't know how the UK is going to end up voting, but UK Foreign Secretary William Hague had said they would back the resolution, but only after receiving a number of assurances. And recall that he told Palestinians must also agree not to, this is a key, not to seek membership of the International Criminal Court, as any move to extend the jurisdiction of the court over the occupied territories could derail any chances of talks resuming. So this is the big issue, the International Criminal Court. Editorial in the Washington Post. Mr. Abbas's advisors have talked of using the new UN status to bring cases against Israel in the criminal court and possibly other international forums, while describing its continued occupation of parts of the West Bank as an act of international aggression. This would cheer many opponents of Israel, but it would also provoke a backlash from European governments as well as Israel and the United States, which would probably respond by cutting off funding to the cash-strapped authority once and for all. Meanwhile, any UN agency Palestine sought to join would probably find itself, like UNESCO, contemplating the loss of at least 1/5 of its budget supplied by Congress. I mean, imagine in today's atmosphere how Congress will react. So bye-bye aid, Palestinians. Oh, and by the way, some stories hit this afternoon on North Korea. Today, Thursday, the International Atomic Energy Agency director said North Korea has pressed ahead since September in its pursuit of two, quote, deeply troubling nuclear projects. And you may have heard that North Korea is feverishly, it seems, preparing a test site for another ballistic missile launch. And the United States already has Homeland Security on guard. Okay, the fiscal cliff. House Speaker John Boehner today said Democrats have to get serious about spending cuts. He added there's been no substantive progress between the White House and the House the last 2 weeks. I'm disappointed where we are. Boehner talked of a down payment on deficit reduction through revenue increases and spending cuts, followed by broader entitlement and tax reform next year. This is what I've been harping on. This is the whole idea of a bridge deal by year end, just to put things off into next year. It is not going to be a legitimate bridge deal. I don't care what they say the next week or two. Upon further review, when you see it, I could guarantee the markets will see through it. And at the same time, of course, there's no way they can do a grand bargain by year end, and that's the significance of what Boehner said today, is that he's already talking beyond that, about just getting a small deal and tackling the bigger issues next year. The market will crash when this crappy little deal is signed before Christmas or Christmas week. Well, Boehner also added, the White House can't just press the agenda for higher taxes on the rich. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell called the Democratic position on taxing the rich, of course, the holy grail of liberalism. Their aim isn't job creation, they're interested in wealth destruction. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid said we're left wondering how long Republicans will force middle-class families to wait and worry, referring to Republicans not wanting to approve the extension of the middle-class tax cuts, allowing tax increases to kick in for the rich. Reid also said he's waiting for a, quote, serious offer from the Republicans. Anyway, with all that going on, the Dow Jones, and I've had two different reports that I'm focusing on. I think CNBC's numbers are incorrect. I have that the Dow finished up 37 to 13,021. S&P 500 up 6, NASDAQ up 20 to 3,012. So the Dow is back over 13,000 and NASDAQ is back over 3,000. London was up 1.1%, Frankfurt up 0.8%, China hit another nearly 4-year low, gold $17.25 up $8, oil rebounded $1.25 to 87.80, and the 10-year Treasury 1.61%. Just a note on the euro crisis, which is now, it seems to be taking a break, one of its customary little breaks. In Spain, the 10-year government bond dropped to its lowest level in 8 months on the misguided belief the region's debt crisis is easing, with the periphery nations Hardly. That doesn't mean we can't have a few weeks of relative calm. Just remember, there is no growth in Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece. There is contraction, recession, no end in sight to it. Granted, Italy's 10-year fell to 4.50%, the lowest since December of 2010. That's good. And leaders in Spain and Italy are getting credit for taking the right steps, plus the European Central Bank said in July it was prepared to do what it takes to keep the crisis from getting out of control again. But these economies aren't growing. The demands on the national budgets are severe, and most importantly, the people aren't happy. It doesn't get any press, for example, but the docile Portuguese are no longer just sitting back and taking the severe austerity measures they've been dealt in stride. I just believe the situation in terms of public unrest will get a lot worse before it gets better. The 50% of the youth in Spain who are unemployed don't care where the 10-year bond is trading. And here's a ridiculous item. Anglo-Irish Bank in legal action against Ernst & Young. Anglo-Irish Bank is taking legal action against former auditor E&Y for failing to spot the lender's massive exposure to the Irish property bubble. I thought that was what management was for. Well, that's all for tonight. I'm leaving a few things on the cutting room floor. Powerball did come in at $588 million. A convenience store in Fountain Hills, Arizona, and a gas station near Dearborn, Missouri. It's where the two winning tickets came from. Keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and for more stuff, go to stocksandnews.com. I'm Brian Trumbore. Take care.